Okay. So, welcome to the world of Azarath. In the present, the year is 115 in the Age of Recovery, or 115 AOR. The recovery is in reference to the war that occurred in the year 3117 Eldorian era. This war affected everyone who lives on Azarath, but primarily it was between the Wood Elves, the Dwarves, and the Tieflings. The Wood Elves, alongside humans and forest gnomes, live in the north spread across a large forest named Paradise Eldoria. The west half is where the homes are built and occupied high up in the trees above the wildlife flora below. The east half, a bit more unruly, conquered by that of beasts and large predators. The dwarves, alongside giants and rock gnomes, live throughout a couple areas: Ironbeard Peaks in the west, as well as the Airborne City in the southwest. And lastly, the Tieflings and Dragonborn live in the southeast in the Sunfire Plateau. Azarath spent those 3,000 plus years being ruled by a High Council from within Eldoria, with Wood Elves living up between 750 and 1,000 years old. There was only ever around like 4 or 5 changes and representation within that High Council for the Wood Elves. The Dwarves would live up to 350 years old. However, they didn't really have interests in the political power, so they just kind of kept themselves mining their ores and Crotanium within Ironbeard Peaks and running Airborne City with the funds provided from selling those ores to the Tieflings and most importantly to the High Elves. And at most Tieflings, the Dragonborn live up to like 100 or 150 years, which is obviously not very long in comparison. So eventually the Wood Elves start treating the Tieflings and Dragonborns poorly, and they were already living in the Sunflower Plateau, which is a very unforgiving terrain with extremely high temperatures, so something that only Tieflings and Dragonborns could withstand for long durations. So anyway, through decades of rumors and propaganda, the Wood Elves turned Azarath against the Tieflings and Dragonborn, and although technically allowed to live anywhere in Azarath, it was made very clear that they were not wanted anywhere outside of the Sunfire Plateau. So, moving forward, it became very difficult for the Tieflings and Dragonborn to gain ground and defend themselves due to their shorter lifespans, and it was undeniable that the longevity of the elves and dwarves also granted wisdom. Nonetheless, growing tired of the oppression, one Tiefling in particular decided to take a stand. After his father was unjustly murdered right in front of him, he made it his goal to gain the respect from the rest of the world. Shortly after his mother passed, he had no family left, and he gathered all the men and women he could that wanted to fight. They trained for a couple decades and built battle strategies, and by combining their skills and knowledge of their best people, they managed to attack their neighbor, the Airborne City, and seize control of it. The king at that time, Titus Ironbeard, the king of the dwarves, Titus Ironbeard, retreated to Ironbeard Peaks, and Odysseus, who is the Tiefling leader now, he would then demand equal respect from the High Council, but he was shot down. The statement from King Elbath of the High Council, the king of basically all of Azarath, he sent a statement that just said, "We will wait, and in 100 years from now, how many of your men and women will fall from their bodies and souls betraying them? For us, the answer is none. Can you say the same?" So, just another jab at their lifespan and saying they're not worth his time. Well, Odysseus would then lead the charge into Ironbeard Peaks, once again rendering successful. They now had a large amount of Crotanium at their disposal. Crotanium is a special ore in Azarath that has magical ability and is just all around durable. Without being that heavy, it's extremely strong. It's just an all around miracle ore. So, using their most knowledgeable and skilled warriors, the Tieflings and Dragonborn discovered a way to use the Crotanium to cause massive amounts of damage. They created as many bombs as they could using Crotanium, and after testing them throughout Ironbeard Peaks, they ambushed Eldoria overhead on flying creatures, dropping a seemingly endless amount of Crotanium bombs, completely obliterating the inhabited half of Eldoria. After the destruction settled down, it was announced that Elbath and Nestro, the High Elf King, was dead. Titus Ironbeard, the Dwarvish King, dead, and Odysseus, the leader of the Tieflings, also dead. Millions upon millions killed in the crosshairs as well. With the Eldorian Empire reduced to ash and waste, a new age was born, the Age of Recovery. So, in the Age of Recovery, the world now has new labels for locations. So, Paradise Eldoria, which was across the whole north, is now split between the Scorched Abyss and just Eldoria. Scorched Abyss is where all the bombs came down, so now it's just pretty much rocks and lava and such. Airborne City, or Ironbeard Peaks, which was in the west, is now called Shadowfall Peaks. Airborne City, that was in the southwest, is now known as the Ruins. And Sunfire Plateau, in the southeast, is still the Sunfire Plateau. The roads connecting these cities and towns weren't really inhibited before the war, and so now they're filled with dozens of camps and little towns and such because it was unaffected by the dangerous wild magic effects, the aftermath of the Crotanium bombs, and just the war in general. So, in the center of all these cities is the biggest town is formed, and this town is known as Nava. So, that kind of happened with the up-and-coming of the Age of Recovery, and then by year 56 AOR, Age of Recovery, other planets started growing interested in Azarath, and due to the wild magic, they were only able to teleport safely onto the planet outside the town of Nava. Otherwise, it was pretty much a gamble what would if you'd even be able to land, or what would happen with you during your teleportation. So now many travelers would come to Azarath to go on quests and gather Crotanium and slay the beasts that were created from the wild magic released during the war. This was kind of like it was a hot spot for adventuring parties, and basically people trying to catch a buck or go on, a wild hunt adventure. However, this went on for 50 years or so, but towards the end of year 114, Age of Recovery, things started to get bad. The adventuring parties started coming back with fewer and fewer survivors, to the point that they just stopped coming back altogether. The monsters and beasts of Azarath started getting bigger, stronger, and worst of all, smarter. The surrounding towns and camps outside of Nava were getting invaded and destroyed, pushing all of them, the survivors, inward towards Nava. So this brings us now to the present day, the year 115 Age of Recovery. Quests from travelers are few and far between. There used to be a dozen or so bounties posted in Nava for people, but now the list is like 2, maybe 3 at a time, because there just are fewer survivors returning to post about bounties. And then rumors and information spreads, and what we know right now, what the party kind of knows, is that there's an army of mutants and giants in Shadowfall Peaks, and they're kind of working alongside an awakened, forgotten god, Zaltharak, who supposedly resides in the Scorched Abyss and takes people's souls but leaves their bodies to roam the wasteland. He is the god of forsaken souls? No, the god of tormented souls. So these entities are known as lost bodies, and they cannot be killed without a ritual. If they get slashed, diced up, whatever it is, they heal back, and they don't have much expression. They're just a body without a soul that gets healed right away. A wild magic forest, that is Eldoria, the remaining half, that's not the Scorched Abyss, is run supposedly by a deranged wizard, but no one has seen and lived to tell, not necessarily because of the wizard, but because of the wild magic that is Eldoria. People that go in there, they get lost, things happen, it's just crazy. It's not a place that you can just walk in. And then lastly, both the Sunfire Plateau and the Ruins are rumored to be getting rejuvenated, and they have a new power. They're becoming the new powerhouse kingdom. to rule over Azarath, and they at the helm is a intimidating tiefling, seemingly taking over for Odysseus. So, with all that, now we take a look at our current party, whose adventure we are following. A band of unique personalities and skill sets. It started as Fuji, a fighter Goliath, Amethyst, the warlock Asmir, Professor Daniel, the rogue Kenku, and Minnie, a sorcerer gnome, who are all Azarathians, and their camps have recently been destroyed through various monsters and stuff, as aforementioned, and so they're kind of retreating inland to Nava, figure out what to do. And upon their arrival, they meet the mighty Bo-Rai Chode, who is a Firbolg monk from another planet. Teleports in as they're arriving. They all kind of join together and discuss stuff while in Nava. And the next day, they start off their journey heading west towards Shadowfall Peaks. And the reason is because one of the two bounties posted was a mammoth with goblins riding on top of it, wreaking havoc. So they said, let's go get some gold. Well, after defeating the mammoth, they camp for the night, and Fuji's human shield, which was a lost body, as mentioned before, he escapes in the night. And when they wake up, the tracks in the morning show that it went towards Shadowfall Peaks. And Fuji said, I'm gonna go get my shield, and the party was like, alright, we'll come with. While on the quest to retrieve the lost body, they run into an NPC named Steve. Steve is a Firbolg cleric who performs rituals that release the lost bodies. Takes 10 minutes, does a little ritual. At the end, the lost bodies revert to ash and are seemingly freed of the torture that is existing without a soul and constantly healing after getting damaged. So not a fun life to live for them. So Steve joins them on their journey, and eventually they come across the entrance to Shadowfall Peaks. They killed the mutated ogre who was guarding the gates. A six-legged animal that was fighting them as well manages to run away and flee, and after that, Steve frees, through ritual, a few of the lost bodies that were being held captive by the ogre. They then proceed into Shadowfall Peaks. During the tunnel journey, the party is split and enters dreamlike scenarios where they have to kill off strange creatures. Luckily, they survive and are brought back to reality at the end of the tunnel. Immediately upon entry, they meet a green halfling wizard named Nyx, a new player, who is meeting a strange man inside of a hut who goes by the name The Traveler. They converse with him. They don't like him. He's a bit weird. Moving on from that, the party decides to split up to cover more ground. For one, it allows them to be more stealthy while they're in this scary place, because there's a lot of them now. And then also, Minnie has learned, the sorcerer Minnie, gnome sorcerer, has learned the ritual to free the lost bodies from Steve. And so now Steve can go one way, Minnie can go the other. They can cover more ground around Shadowfall Peaks and free as many lost bodies as fast as possible. So, we follow our adventurers who head around the south edge, which includes the famous warrior monk Bo-Rai Chode, a sneaky rogue Daniel the Kenku, and the newest member halfling Nyx, the powerful wizard from a different world as well, although he's been traveling in Azarath for like a year now. So, upon their travels, they run into a tiefling warlock, who they find out is named Malmus. Malmus was camping outside of a little area that inhabits a frost giant and some goblins. Well, unfortunately, during their meeting with Malmus, because up in the rocks, a little too much commotion is caused due to a natural one, and their cover is blown. An all-out fight starts, and ultimately ends with the victory for the adventurers. They take on the frost giant, clean up the goblins, done and done. And yeah, so after all that, they enter the camp to find a few things worth noting, which first, there's a giant magical ice sphere on top of a fire that seemingly can't melt it, and someone is inside of it. Malmus thinks he knows a ritual that can release this person, so they kind of pat out the fire and he starts his ritual. Steve rushes over to a bunch of lost bodies that are mounted up and stabbed through the abdomen upon stakes, who are seemingly being arms and legs ripped off here and there, eaten by the goblins and the Goliaths, just used for food as they can regenerate new arms and legs. So Steve rushes over to start performing rituals and saving them. And then Daniel, Nyx, and Bo start walking over to a strange glowing orb that floats by the edge of the camp. And that is where we left off. There's also just a little garden with a few lost body elves who are tending to it very slowly, meticulously. And then there is one house that they haven't looked into yet. So that is where we will pick up. Whew.